I had my own experience working on the late night show. We were constantly doing sketches. There'd be a sketch that needed, a kid to play me, from 20 years ago, constantly, or a kid who is in the audience who doesn't understand something, constantly doing these sketches where we need kids. I remember very clearly sometimes there were kids that came up to me, maybe 8 years old, and this happened more than once, but they would come up to me and go, "Excuse me, Mr. O'Brien, I am Billy." "Oh, hi, Billy. Thanks for helping us out today. You're doing a great job at rehearsal. I just want to say you are a formidable talent." And I could look in the background and see the mother peering out of the dressing room like, "It's formidable. We went over this.
Say it.
Say it so that you're booked again, you fucker."
Yeah.
And it bummed me out.
Right.
It seriously, every now and then, one of those child actors, one was a little kid who nailed it and grew up into Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, yeah?
And you're like, okay, that's great. I think we had one or two of those, but for the most part, it is a perilous thing to be a child actor. And, it's so fickle. And even as adults, full-on aging adults for myself, it's still hard not to pay attention to who's up, who's down, who's where. It takes, and that's with, I didn't have anybody recognize me on the street until I was 30 years old. That's when I got the late night show. And I had a lot of grounding before then. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea. I think if I had been recognized or had any kind of cachet when I was 11 years old, I'd be a mass murderer.
Yeah.
So a very good one.
Yeah.
Methodical.
It is a very permissive culture that if you have some sort of success as a kid, you kind of get used to. It's like it's junk food, and kids don't have any self-control for junk food. They eat it all up.
Right.
And you're also learning how to convincingly be somebody else at the exact time you're trying to figure out who you are. So it's just a big mind fuck too, and it's a minefield to go through. And I'm really fortunate that somehow my sort of stock engine came out able to kind of navigate that somewhat decently. I mean, I am nuts. I'm crazy, but I'm functional.
I said you're squirrely. I didn't say you were crazy. Squirrely, hard to get a beat on you. I know there's a lot of stuff there I don't want to go near.
You can get near the cage. Just don't start poking around in it.
I would drive cross country with Arnett, Sean in a second. That's not happening unless, like you say, there's like a barrier, a caged barrier. I'm driving a police car.
Be in the back with a privacy glass.
No, you're in the back. I'm driving you.
Yeah, okay.
I'm dressed as a sheriff, and I'm driving you cross country, but there's a cage, and you're shackled. Every now and then, I pass you some green tea, but that's about it. Uh-huh. That's all that's happening. It is interesting to me that a important linchpin of your turnaround, which you say is Arrested Development, the guy behind that, one of the guys behind it, and the narrator of the show, Ron Howard, famously one of the few examples of a child star who just nailed it in his adult life and seemed to make every right call. Did he ever give you any insight into that?
Only by example, like during the vast wasteland of my 20s, I was in an attempt to try to self-educate. I'd watch a lot of news. I was a big fan of Charlie Rose. I'd watch that show religiously, and Ron Howard was on it once, and I remember watching his interview. And Ron Howard is at all times, it seems, just about the most gracious, magnanimous guy you'd ever find. And so I'm watching him just be incredibly warm and kind. And he's not doing that because he needs to kiss Charlie Rose's ass or that he's nervous about being on the show or golly gosh, or what. He's just genuinely that and is not worried about coming across as an ass kisser or eager, or he's just being as kind as he is.
Yeah.
And is not worried about masking that, because if you grew up in the sort of cynical environment I grew up in, it's, it's like, well, make sure you look like you don't want it, or make sure that girl can't tell that you like her, be mean, or when you go on an audition, make it seem like you don't really want it or that it's an inconvenience, whatever, toxic crap I was listening to as a kid. He was completely at odds with that, so I remember sitting there watching that interview and going, if I ever get relevance again, any sort of industry capital again, the greatest thing about it will be that I will be able to be as kind as I want to be and not worry about it coming across as being too eager and wanting the job, or and then I got Arrested Development, like working for this guy, and he did all the voiceover, so he was never really on set. So I never really met him until after the show had been going for a while. And eventually I think it was pretty late, maybe 4 or 5 years into, I finally had dinner with him. And I told him the story, and I told him about what...
Did he narrate the dinner?
And then told you to fuck off.
Yeah. He pulled the mask back. He said, yeah, fooled another one.
Jason seemed perplexed. He wanted the eggplant risotto, but he didn't know if it was going to be too heavy.
Yeah, I think he understood what I was saying.
Yeah.
That not only his example kind of provided this North Star for me, but the actual show itself gave me the capital that I was, reaching for, hoping for, that I could stop kind of acting twice going into auditions, kind of like trying to be like, oh yeah, hey, what's up everybody, and it's fucking such a douchebag. I was just like, and of course it would make me incredibly nervous because I've got to pull off that performance, and now it's time to do the audition, and now I got to pull off this. I was just like exhausted.
Well, they say it's exhausting to be a pathological liar, because you have to keep all of your stories straight.
Right.
And it is exhausting to have to put on a persona.
Right.
To then audition for something where you're then another persona. Right. But then if you don't get it, you have to switch into the persona, which is, I didn't really need it anyway. I'm cool. Yeah. I'm good.
It's just garbage, So thankfully, I kind of got through that to a certain extent, but it was painful. I mean, my 20s were just like it was fun, but a real sort of head trip for me, because I'm transitioning from like all of that fame and success and easy road to not making as much money, not having the actual sustenance to because my confidence came from my work.
Yeah.
Now that I don't have the work, now what do I have the confidence on? It's just like, ay.
Can you identify, because 9 people out of 10 who went through what you went through would not have worked out. Can you identify something in you that helped you say, okay, I'm partying too much, this has to stop? There is an inner resource that you have,
right,
that 90% of people in your situation would not have.
But I perhaps, but I think everybody's got it, because all it was just goals and foresight and vision and everybody has a way they like to think of themselves.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that you can't do and certain things that you want to achieve and incorporate that make that vision legit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew I wanted to be a husband, a dad, and I wanted to direct a movie as an adult. That was what I always said to myself as a kid. And so I knew I had to do certain things to make those 3 things happen. I had to build up sort of acting capital to be able to say, hey, now I want to direct, the famous t-shirt, right? I couldn't be like, a fucking drug addict and a drunk and expect to have any sort of relationship that had any legs. And then, being a father follows that.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to kind of wind down the 20s fun at some point. And I didn't know, do you get rid of all that stuff and then the work will come, or should I wait for the work to come to be sort of like, the little pacifier that allows me to like stop doing all the other stuff? It ended up kind of all happening at the same time, which was nice. But yeah, I guess it would just be that. So I don't think I'm not that special. I think everybody wants certain things for themselves in the future. And I think it's just about having perhaps the discipline to say, okay, you kind of got to do X, Y, and Z to get to A, B, and C. And at what point do you want to start to implement that plan?